What if within you lies a hidden code, an ancestral fragment that didn't arise by chance nor by genetic mutation, but by design? A secret inheritance that doesn't belong to the logic of Darwinian evolution, but to something much older and sacred: Eden. In the opening pages of Genesis, the Bible speaks to us about the creation of the human being. For many, it's a poetic metaphor. For others, a spiritual truth. But what few have stopped to consider is that the text seems to speak of two distinct origins, two moments, two processes, two types of humanity. This has puzzled theologians, rabbis, philosophers, and scientists for centuries. Are we simply the result of millions of years of biological evolution, or is there something more? Is there a divine design encoded within us, a secret plan inserted deep within our DNA? This is where a fascinating and revealing concept comes into play: spiritual DNA. We're not referring to the deoxyribonucleic acid studied by biology, but to an energetic, sacred, invisible matrix that sustains your essence as a human being. Many mystical traditions, such as Kabbalah, Midrash, Gnosticism, and apocryphal texts, speak of this, of a divine spark that dwells within each being, a trace of the Creator. An inner programming that wasn't the product of chance, but of Eden. What if that programming is still alive within you, albeit dormant? Kabbalah calls it Nitzotz Elokit, the spark of God. The Gnostics referred to it as the seed of light. And some ancient Christian mystics spoke of the incorruptible inner man, a part of us that hasn't entirely fallen. This spiritual code doesn't appear in medical exams, but it manifests in consciousness, in the search for purpose, in that deep impulse that makes you ask, who am I really? Where do I come from? Why am I here? And if you're asking these questions, it's because that spark is trying to awaken. This mystery leads us to look beyond conventional science and ask, what if the human being was created with two parallel dimensions? One visible, physical, biological, and another invisible, eternal, divine. And even more, what if there were two acts of creation at the origin? One to form a spiritual being in the image and likeness of the divine, and another, later, that made us from clay, vulnerable, fallen, but capable of redemption. This takes us directly to the first chapters of Genesis, where the text, without much explanation, presents us with two accounts of human creation. Two versions, two beginnings. What if what seems like repetition is actually a coded secret? A secret that involves you, two humanities, two genetic heritages. Now imagine the following. What if the humanity you know isn't a single entity? What if the human species has been divided into two lineages from the very beginning of existence? Like an ancestral bifurcation in the divine code, one line with an original spark, a sacred trace, an Eden DNA. And another, although similar in appearance, doesn't carry that awakened spark. This idea isn't science fiction. It's present, veiled, in the oldest scriptures, in sacred texts, in the mysteries of Jewish mysticism, Gnosticism, and even certain early Christian manuscripts. Let's start with the root of the mystery, the book of Genesis. Two chapters, two accounts, two versions of human origin. And for the ancient sages, that wasn't a coincidence. It was a key. In Genesis chapter 1, God, Elohim, creates the human being in his image and likeness, male and female together. A joint, complete, harmonious, direct creation. There's no clay, no gardens, no serpents, just a sacred affirmation. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Here there's no individualism, no names, just humanity. Adam isn't a proper name, it's a collective term. This being created in the divine image, according to the Kabbalists, would be the Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, the archetypal humanity, the original design of Eden. A spiritual, complete, multidimensional being, a reflection of divinity in human form. But everything changes in Genesis chapter 2. Here the tone becomes intimate, narrative, almost tragic. God is no longer Elohim, but YHWH Elohim, the Lord God. And he no longer creates man with a word. He forms him from the dust, with his hands, breathes life into his nostrils, places him in a limited Garden Eden, assigns him tasks, warns him of a prohibition, and when he sees that he's alone, he doesn't create a woman independently, but extracts her from him. There's no longer a joint creation, but a dual, derived, dependent process. What's happening here? Why such marked differences? Are we facing a stylistic repetition, as some modern theologians often say, or something deeper? The ancient sages were clear. It wasn't the same humanity. The first was a spiritual, full, complete being. The second, an earthly, vulnerable being, destined to err and suffer. Both human, yes, but of different natures. And if this theory is true, then we're facing a colossal mystery. There are two humanities, two lineages, two heritages. On one hand, the spiritual descendants of Adam Kadmon, who still carry in their essence a pure fragment, an echo of Eden, and on the other, the children of clay, molded to experience physicality, pain, the fall, and perhaps redemption. This duality isn't just literary or symbolic. It has genetic, spiritual, and existential implications. Some contemporary scholars have dared to ask, could there be a code within our DNA that reflects this dual origin? A dormant gene, so to speak. A portion of spiritual light that some still carry, while others have simply forgotten it. An Eden DNA, extinguished but not lost. Let's return to the figure of Adam Kadmon. For the Kabbalists, this being wasn't a flesh and blood individual. He was a manifestation of divine light, a pattern, an archetypal form that was later reduced or filtered to create the human being as we know him today. The physical body would then be an imperfect container, a reduced replica of the original design. The soul, on the other hand, would be a direct spark from that first being. And what about Eve? Here too, there's debate. Some currents hold that the woman of Genesis 1 wasn't Eve, that Eve only emerges in the second creation as a derivative of the earthly Adam, while the original woman of chapter 1, in the image of God, represented a full spiritual form equal to her male counterpart. Who then was that original woman? Some ancient mystical texts call her Lilith, an enigmatic figure rejected, erased from the official narrative. But her existence, though veiled, suggests that the first humanity was complete, egalitarian, and spiritual, and that the second was a fallen, divided, fragmented humanity. This break, this cut between the two humanities, would then be the origin of the inner conflict we all feel, the yearning for something more, the nostalgia for a lost paradise, the feeling that we don't entirely belong to this world, perhaps because we don't entirely belong, perhaps because within us an Edenic DNA still beats, not in the form of nucleotides or molecules, but as a spiritual code embedded in our consciousness, waiting to be awakened. 3. Symbolic and textual evidence. When we talk about the DNA of Eden, we're not referring to something that can be seen under a microscope, but to a hidden code in sacred texts, one that reveals itself only to those willing to look beyond the words. And perhaps the first powerful clue lies right at the beginning, Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. At first glance, it seems like just another verse. But pause for a second. Here it doesn't say he formed man, it says he created him. There is no mention of dust, no mention of a garden, no ribs, no serpents, no prohibitions. That word create is key. In Hebrew, the verb used is bara, and bara is a verb reserved exclusively for divine action. It means to create out of nothing, a pure, transcendent act. Every time it's used in the Old Testament, it is God who does it, never humans. That already tells us something. This first act of creation is unique, sacred, spiritual. But when we move to chapter 2, the verb changes. Now the text uses yatsar, which means to form, to mold, to shape with hands, like a potter with clay. This already speaks to a fundamental difference. One is a spiritual act, the other a manual, physical, limited one. Here we no longer have a universal man, but an individual man, Adam. And this Adam is formed from the dust of the earth, an expression that connects us with the material, the ephemeral, the fragility of human existence. And here comes something even more unsettling. In Genesis 1, it says man and woman were created together, at the same time. But in Genesis 2, Eve appears later, as a solution to Adam's loneliness. She is not created from nothing, nor as an equal, but from a rib. This detail, beyond the modern controversy, shows that something has changed. Has the original design been lost? Is God now improvising on a fallen model? Or even more? Could it be that the first human, created in the divine image, is no longer present, and that this new humanity is a second version, a physical iteration of a spiritual pattern? The ancients thought so. In Jewish mysticism, Adam Kadmon from chapter 1 is the supreme archetype, a form of light, a channel between the divine and creation, an original model from which all lower planes are derived, whereas the Adam made of clay in chapter 2 is his shadow, his denser, more limited version, necessary to experience the physical world. This also aligns with the thought of the Apostle Paul, who wrote in his letters, especially Romans and Corinthians, about the old man and the new man. The old man is fallen Adam, bound to sin, the body, and death. The new man is the spiritual being, recreated in Christ, who bears the renewed image of God. Paul even says, "The first man, Adam, became a living being, the last Adam, a life-giving spirit." 1 Corinthians 15:45. Here we see that duality once again. The first Adam, made of earth, subject to the fall, and the last Adam, spiritual, divine, a return to the original design. This is not abstract theology. It is confirmation that even in early Christianity, the idea of two human natures, two lineages, was present, one of clay and one of light. This distinction is also reflected in the use of God's names in both chapters of Genesis. In chapter 1, the Creator is called Elohim, a plural word, full of mystery. In Hebrew, it can refer to gods or to the fullness of divinity. Some interpreters suggest Elohim represents the totality of divine emanations, like a heavenly congregation, an infinite source. But in chapter 2, the name YHWH Elohim appears, translated as the Lord God. This name is intimate, personal, the name revealed to Moses at the burning bush. HWH is the God of covenant, the one who walks with man, who intervenes directly, the one who forms, plants, breathes, and speaks face to face. This name change is not arbitrary. It is a textual clue. It suggests we are facing two aspects of divinity, or better yet, two manifestations of the same God with two different purposes. Elohim, the universal, transcendent creator who creates spiritual beings perfect, complete. Yhu Elohim, the personal God who descends, forms imperfect beings, and guides them through error, pain, and redemption. So what is all of this telling us? That the biblical text, far from being contradictory, is encoding a profound message, that there are two moments of creation, that there are two types of humanity, and perhaps two different DNAs. One visible, biological DNA, which you can trace in a lab, and another invisible, Edenic DNA, the spiritual code that dwells in the depths of the human soul. A code that cannot be measured by science, but can be awakened through awareness, because it is not in the body, but in the divine spark that each of us carries within. A spark that, according to the mystics, was planted by God in the beginning of time. 4. Where is the DNA of Eden today? Imagine for a moment that this spiritual DNA, this sacred code created in the beginning by Elohim, still lives inside you, not as a metaphor but as a latent reality, asleep, waiting to awaken. The ancient sages did not speak of this as something abstract, but as a real energetic structure, inscribed in the deepest part of the human soul. A kind of divine spark that comes directly from Eden, from that moment when humanity was created in the image and likeness of God. In Kabbalah, this spark is known as Nitzatz Elokit, the fragment of divine light that remained within every soul after the fall. According to the Zohar, when Adam was expelled from Eden, he didn't lose everything. Within him remained a portion of that original energy, and that portion was passed down through generations like a dormant seed. That seed, this sacred DNA, is still there. And even though humanity fell into forgetfulness, even though it was scattered by wars, desires, and pain, the code is still alive. The Gnostics called this principle the spark of light, trapped inside the material body, like a jewel encased in stone. They said it could only be freed through gnosis, knowledge, a direct connection to the divine. In other words, it is not inherited automatically, it must be activated. And here comes the essential question. How do you activate the DNA of Eden? The answers vary according to mystical traditions, but they all agree on a key point. Awakening it is not an intellectual process, but a spiritual one. Some say it's activated through elevated consciousness, the moment when you stop acting from ego, fear, or vanity, and begin living with purpose, compassion, and truth. Meditation or deep prayer, in which the soul enters into direct communion with the source of all that is. Moral decisions, when you choose goodness even when it's difficult, when you act with justice even in the dark. Unconditional love, because pure, selfless love is the highest vibration of the divine spark. These practices are not magic formulas, but paths that align your soul with its origin. And when you do this, something changes. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about remembering who you really are. Think about it. Why do we feel that unexplained nostalgia? That sense that this world isn't truly our home? Why are there moments when, even if you have everything, something essential still feels missing? Maybe it's because there's a part of you, your Edenic DNA, that still remembers paradise. And that memory is like a silent echo, calling from deep within. Return. Awaken. Remember where you come from. Some mystics claim we're all born with this seed, but not everyone cultivates it. Not everyone waters it. Not everyone listens to its voice. And that leads us to an unsettling reality. What about those who ignore this divine spark? Could it be that some people's spiritual DNA is no longer active? That they live completely disconnected from their sacred essence? Many ancient texts, like those from the Gnostics or even the Dead Sea Scrolls, spoke of two kinds of human beings living side by side. The children of light, who still carry and nurture the code of Eden. The children of darkness, who have forgotten who they are, acting only from the body, ambition, and desire. This division is not about race, ideology, or nationality. It is spiritual, and the most surprising part is, both can live in the same family, the same city, the same generation. What sets them apart is not appearance, but vibration, connection to the divine, level of consciousness. And you? Where do you stand on that scale? The very fact that you're still reading this, that these words resonate with you, is already a sign. It means your spark is not dead. Maybe it's asleep, but it still vibrates. It still remembers. And now you can decide whether to keep living as you are, or take the first step to awaken your DNA of Eden. 5. Spiritual and contemporary implications. If we truly carry within us a fragment of Eden, a divine code, a dormant spiritual DNA, then the next big question is, what does that mean for our lives today? It's not just a theological curiosity. It's a reality that could transform the way you live, your decisions, your relationships, and your purpose. The first implication is radical and transformative. To awaken the DNA of Eden is a call to inner evolution. It's not about waiting for the world to change. It's about remembering your true identity and starting to live from that truth. Because if a code of light lives within you, then living as if you are just dust, just flesh, instinct, or survival, is to betray yourself. It's like having a buried jewel and never digging deep enough to find it. Here's a powerful idea. What if many of the people you see every day no longer carry this code in an awakened state? Think about it. We live surrounded by people who behave like automatons. They react, they consume, they compete, they harm without remorse. They live in disconnection. They look human, but what if something within them no longer resonates with light? Many spiritual traditions, from Kabbalah to modern esoteric paths, speak of two kinds of human beings. The awakened, those who cultivate consciousness, who seek truth, who feel empathy, who vibrate with a higher calling. The disconnected, those who have cut off the link to their divine essence, who live only on the surface, who don't feel, don't seek, don't remember. This isn't a judgment, it's a state of the soul. And here comes the most powerful truth. We may be living in a civilization where the majority has forgotten Eden, where noise, ego, materialism, and fear have silenced the spark, where spiritual DNA is hibernating, waiting for someone to awaken it. And how do you awaken it? With every decision, with every act of love when you could have chosen hate, with every moment of peaceful silence when you could have screamed, with every prayer, meditation, or instant where you connect with something greater than yourself. Awakening the DNA of Eden is a process. It's not automatic, it's not easy, but it is the only path to an authentic life, a transcendent life, a life aligned with your origin. And when you do it, everything changes. You feel a purpose beyond success. Your intuition sharpens. You start to see people and situations with new eyes. Synchronicities multiply, and you feel something that words can't describe. An inner memory begins to awaken, a deep knowing that you came from somewhere else. and that you're here for something more. Many call this the return of the soul to its original state. A reconnection to the divine design you were meant to manifest here on Earth. This is where the whole message of this video text comes together. Are you simply another result of biological evolution? Or are you a child of Eden? Are you living from the programming of the world? Or from your spiritual origin? Some still seek physical proof of this truth. But maybe that proof isn't in laboratories. Maybe it's in your daily life, in how you respond when you could have reacted, in how you choose compassion in a world full of indifference, in how you choose to awaken when it would be easier to keep sleeping. Because the great truth is this: you choose. You choose whether this Edenic DNA remains asleep inside you, or whether today, right now, you take the first step to awaken it. And once it awakens, there is no going back. You live with purpose, you breathe with gratitude, and you understand that you are not here by accident. You are here to bring heaven to earth. And if this truth has resonated deep within your soul, then there's something you must see. Because this entire mystery about the DNA of Eden begins with a key that lies in the very beginning of the Bible. Click now to watch the video about the 2 human creations in Genesis. There you'll discover why we were made twice, and how the true spiritual journey began long before we imagined. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, you're not here to settle. You're here to awaken.